They were the last couple anyone expected to break. Not after everything they'd survived. A mess that could have turned into a breakup saga. Explosive family dinners that made even producers shift uncomfortably. And that unforgettable green card era where Andrei fought tooth and nail just to be taken seriously. But here's what no one saw coming. After surviving the storm, it was the silence that started to kill the connection. The chaos died down. The cast shifted and their story moved into the settled-down zone. Cute kids, house in Florida, matching outfits, a family business content, and then something weird started happening. The fire that once made Andrei a lightning rod, camera gold meme material. It dimmed, but not in a peaceful way. It felt like he just faded. Show up, smile for the vlog. Grill dinner, fix the garage door, maybe glance at the camera, maybe not. He didn't cause drama, but he also wasn't really there. Outsiders wouldn't sense it. The casual scroll on Instagram showed cute milestones, clean captions, toddler chaos, birthday balloons, but inside those filtered frames, a man losing himself by the day. Not drinking, not cheating, not lashing out. That's what made it harder to notice. It wasn't bad. It was a blank. Elizabeth had gotten used to holding this family together through noise, through her dad questioning every move, through her sisters tagging in with side insults, through public speculation that Andrei was too jealous, too alpha, too aggressive. But now that the noise was gone, everything felt too still. She didn't say it out loud. But sometimes it felt like smiling for thousands of people while your partner quietly disconnects was a different kind of loneliness. Most fans assumed they were the realest couple on the show. Toxic at times, problematic, sure, but real always. They'd outlived couples that were glued together by sex appeal, brand deals, and passive aggression. But real doesn't mean stable. And silence doesn't mean peace. The truth is, no one teaches you how to survive survival mode. Especially not if you've had to spend years proving your worth in a country that keeps watching you like you're a guest. Andrei never said these things. Not on the show. Not in interviews. But the man had been living under pressure since he landed. First to win over Elizabeth's family, then to make a living. Then to be a new father in a culture that measured masculinity by income and likability. And when he finally had all of it, wife, house, green card, some clout, there was no victory lap. There was still everyone waiting for him to mess up. At some point, the weight of performing strength breaks your back. Andrei stopped yelling. Not because he matured, because he was tired. Maybe Elizabeth should have asked more or pressed harder. But to be fair, would he have answered honestly? The hero husband act was layers deep. The guy didn't show cracks easily, and anyway, she didn't want to be another person demanding something from him. So instead she adjusted, smiled wider, posted more, changed the subject, pretended everything was normal even when he was already slipping away. It wasn't a scandal that triggered it. Not a fight, not a cheating reveal. It was something smaller. A dinner table, some light conversation, and a casual idea for a family trip when the floor dropped. It started like any other night. The kids were finally asleep. The house was still, and Elizabeth tried to do what she'd always done: smooth things over. With good intentions. She brought up a light topic, a family trip, something fun, something small they could look forward to. Maybe the beach, maybe Disney, just a way to make things feel normal again. That's when it happened. Andrei didn't flinch, didn't argue. He barely reacted until he finally looked at her and said it. Not loud, not dramatic, no build-up, just quietly. Almost like it escaped his mouth before he could catch it. I don't know if I can keep doing this. The words didn't land. All at once. At first, she thought he meant maybe work pressure, maybe exhaustion, typical dad stress. But her gut said otherwise, that stillness in his eyes. That was different. That wasn't burnout. That was something closer to resignation. She asked, doing what? Hoping he'd clarify. Instead, he looked away. And that's when she knew. There are things people scream when they want to be heard. But the scariest things, they come in whispers. Divorce isn't always a slap. Sometimes it's a sigh, a moment so soft you catch yourself wishing you misheard it. And when it finally hit, she froze. Not angry, not upset, just stunned. This wasn't a rage-fueled ultimatum. This was worse. This was someone who had quietly slipped so far into himself that even leaving no longer felt explosive. It just felt like an option. A logical escape from years of tight smiles, internal performances, and pretending to be the strong one. It's one thing to fight. It's another when the other person isn't even sure they care to fight anymore. If your marriage looks perfect on Instagram, this part might change how you see everything. Andrei didn't blame her, didn't bring up the show, didn't mention the in-laws. All he said was that he felt confined. That no matter how much progress he made, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was trapped in expectations he had no blueprint for. Be the strong man, the patient father, the understanding husband, the immigrant success story. The reformed cast member. Every time he walked into a room, he felt watched. Even when cameras weren't rolling, the pressure didn't shut off. Not from fans. Not from social media trolls, not from her family, not even from himself. It was like playing 5 roles at once and forgetting what his actual personality even was. Romania felt like a lifetime ago. And in America, he was never quite enough in the eyes of the people who mattered to her. Elizabeth tried to speak, but nothing sounded right. What do you say to that? Do you comfort someone who's already halfway out the door? Do you ask them to stay knowing they might only stay out of guilt? SH didn't cry. Not then. Her hands went cold. Her breath shortened. Andrei just sat there, elbows on the table, shoulders low, tired. He didn't look angry, just like a man who had finally run out of versions of himself to mold into. When it was over, he stood up, rinsed out his glass, and went to bed without saying anything else. The next morning, he made breakfast, talked to the kids, asked her if they needed to buy more snacks for the house. Same tone, as if nothing had happened. As if those words the night before didn't splinter through her chest like shrapnel. Every hour after that moment, at the dinner table felt like slow-motion free fall. Elizabeth didn't know whether to bring it up again or pretend it never happened. What if she pushed and he said the word again? This time louder, more final. So she said nothing. She watched instead, quietly, closely. Every breath he took became a clue. Every silence became evidence. He was still living in the house, still showing up as a father, still cooking, still sleeping beside her sometimes. But things were different. Too many late nights on the couch. Too many I'm just tired brush-offs. And the way he avoided eye contact for just a second longer than before, it wrecked her. He wasn't slamming doors or storming out. That would have been easier. Anger at least. Signals emotion. This was different. This was apathy. Like his soul had already started packing boxes no one else could see. Elizabeth didn't tell her sisters. Not even the one she barely tolerates. She knew exactly how that would go. Condescension disguised as concern, judgment wrapped in fake sympathy. She couldn't give them the satisfaction because the second they found out it would become, "We told you so." She wasn't afraid of them judging him. She was afraid that maybe this once they'd be right. She didn't tell her dad either. Chuck had been skeptical since day one. Even after everything Andrei had done for the family business, she knew Chuck still low-key saw him as the outsider. If he found out about this, it wouldn't just be, "I warned you." It would be every bad stereotype they'd ever weaponized, now validated. Andrei didn't bring it up again either. That haunted her the most. He wasn't ice-cold or rude. He was polite and chill even. But it wasn't natural. Not him. It was like he'd installed autopilot. Get through the day. Smile when needed. Act like a husband without feeling like one. Elizabeth started faking it even harder online. More reals. More funny kid moments. More date nights carefully cropped for captions. Her followers saw family bliss. Her screen time spiked. Posting became survival. Because if everything looked okay online, maybe she could delay dealing with how bad it was offline. She could fool the internet. But she couldn't fool her own body. Her chest tightened every time he walked in the room. She overanalyzed every breath he took at the dinner table. Her stomach twisted when he hugged the kids, but didn't touch her. And still, she said nothing. But silence breaks people differently. It doesn't slam doors. It leaks inside. One night, long after the house went quiet, she sat on the edge of the bed, not even sure why her heart was racing. She turned to him. Her voice cracked before she got the words out. "Did you mean it?" He didn't answer right away. He sat still, elbows on his knees. Eyes locked on the floor like he was trying to rearrange his thoughts into something coherent. Elizabeth held her breath. That quiet, fragile pause stretched long enough to make her regret asking. But then came the response. Soft, broken, more real than anything he said in months. He told her it wasn't about her, not her personality, not the marriage, not even the family drama that used to drain them both. It was about him, about something inside him that had gained dim. He said he walked around every day feeling like a version of someone he didn't recognize. Not the man who left Moldova chasing something new. Not the guy who fell in love with her in Dublin. And definitely not the guy her audience saw online. He called himself a ghost inside his own body. A provider, a protector, a reality show character, but not Andrei. The constant pressure to keep moving forward kept him from realizing how far off track he'd already gone. He never had time to stop or slow down. Because stopping means things could fall apart. Pausing invites judgment, and pausing as an immigrant trying to prove your worth daily almost feels like weakness. So he kept pushing, and somewhere in the middle of holding everything together, he fell apart on the inside. Sometimes a man finally speaks when it's almost too late for his words to land. He said he carried too many masked layers for too long. The strong husband persona in front of her family. The filtered version of himself on their social media. The role of redeemed villain for fans who finally warmed up to him. But none of those masks gave him space to just be human. And it wore him down. He wasn't angry anymore. He was exhausted. Elizabeth listened, silent, stunned, not because she hadn't seen hints, but because he had finally confirmed what she feared, that he wasn't shutting her out because of something she did. He felt lost inside himself. And somehow, that hurt more. There was no yelling, no guilt tripping. What he offered wasn't an attack. It was a confession. He told her waking up every day felt like digging through a fog. That no matter how hard he worked, he still didn't feel secure. And as much as he knew she loved him, there were parts of his soul that love couldn't reach. Because he had buried them a long time ago, trying to become the version of a man everyone wanted him to be. Elizabeth tried to hold his hand, and he didn't pull away. But he didn't hold it back either. He apologized for the night he said he wanted out. Said that moment scared him too, but then he followed it with something even heavier. He didn't take it back. He said he regrets saying it. He regrets seeing her break. But he still doesn't know how to fix what broke inside him or if it can be fixed. After that night, something shifted. Barely noticeable. At first, the air didn't feel as thick. She wasn't tiptoeing around him like before. And he wasn't completely retreating behind that blank stare anymore. But they weren't fixed, not even close. What they were doing was something slower, more delicate. They were testing the water on what it meant to stay. When leaving had already been said out loud, Elizabeth stopped trying to solve him. She stopped lobbing cheer-up lines and "we got this" reassurances. Instead, she did something harder. She listened for real. No interruptions, no reflexive defending, no jumping in with counterpoints. She let ugly truths hang in the air without rushing to make them prettier. She felt him talk about things he'd been swallowing for years and forced herself not to minimize it. That meant staying quiet when he'd say things like, "I feel like your family never truly wanted me here." Or, "I don't even know who I am anymore when I look in the mirror." Andrei started opening up, not with speeches, but with slow, broken pieces. Confessions filtered through guilt, unedited fear. He admitted he didn't know how to be vulnerable without feeling exposed. That every time he showed softness on camera, it got twisted. That every kind moment he showed her family got compared to previous grudges. And being cast as the hard-headed Moldovan alpha early on. That role stuck harder than anything else he did. Even when he changed, he wasn't ashamed of being strong. He was tired of only being strong. People assumed their fights were the problem. But in reality, it was the performance of looking like they didn't fight that did the most damage. Faking peace exhausts you. Stage smiles drain faster than angry tears. They weren't broken because of toxicity. They were drowning in invisible expectations. Real healing doesn't look like trek and family goals. It looks like hard, awkward conversations at midnight. Some nights were better. They laughed again. Andrei seemed lighter, easier. He played more with the kids. Not like it was an obligation, but like he was reconnecting with part of himself. Elizabeth could finally talk about little things without the tension swallowing the room. But there were still setbacks, days he'd go quiet again, moments where she could tell the guilt crept back in. And then something neither of them planned for started bubbling to the surface. The cameras began picking up the shift. Not directly, but the vibe was off. Elizabeth didn't sparkle the way she used to. Producers asked her if everything was fine. She smiled too hard when she said it was. Andrei, normally blunt and direct, sidestepped even simple questions. Not angry, not shady. Just distant. The show thrives on tension, and now they smelled storyline gold. Another couple on thin ice, but this time the ice wasn't cracking because of cheating or betrayal. It was something harder to sell a scandal, but way more real. She tried her best really, but her eyes gave her away. The smiles were tight, the laughs came late, and her sparkle, the one producers counted on, had dulled. Elizabeth wasn't flirty, wasn't sharp, wasn't even opinionated. Now, she was just there, floating through. Seems like someone going through the motions. Andrei wasn't helping either. He dodged filming days, skipped group events unless absolutely required. On camera, he barely looked at her. Production noticed, of course, they did. It's their job to read energy, and theirs completely off. This wasn't the usual on-screen tiff that gets patched with a sit-down and a toast. This was avoidance, flatline. No fire, no ice. Just detachment. It was quiet on set. The day had slipped out. They weren't even filming at the time. Elizabeth was off to the side sipping water, trying not to cry. A producer she trusted saw it. Someone who's worked with her long enough to clock when something was off. They didn't push. They just asked if she was okay with that calm, too soft voice that says, "You're allowed to be honest." Her lip trembled before her voice did. And then she said it. Andrei asked me for a divorce. No cameras. No zoom-ins, no dramatic music, just a whisper. This wasn't filmed for the season. It was whispered off camera. That's how deep it went. And in that moment, even the producer didn't know what to say because public couples are rarely allowed to fall apart in private. The audience asked for transparency, but what they really want is drama they can digest. This was grief, discomfort, hopelessness. It wasn't polished and framed. It was raw. And now Andrei's worst fear was inching closer to reality. Someone on set started talking. Probably not with intention, probably not to stir chaos, but whispers on productions move fast. And one day later, a DM popped up in a gossip account's inbox. Something's up with Elizabeth and Andrei. The internet doesn't wait. Not for confirmation, not for context, not for healing. All it took was a whisper, a single vague message to a gossip page with enough traction, and suddenly the online vultures were circling. At first, it was subtle. Followers noticed the photos were changing. Not disappearing, but spacing out. Less couple content, more kids, more solo shots of Elizabeth holding their daughter or candid pictures of Andrei grilling with no tags. No captions that screamed family man, just photos. Strangely neutral, oddly quiet. Then the tone changed. Followers began commenting, "Why does he never look at her the same anymore? Where's all the couple stuff? Is everything okay?" One pointed out that Elizabeth hadn't posted an anniversary message this year. Another noted Andrei missed a family gathering. Screenshots were forwarded. Reddit threads popped up. People started watching them like hawks, decoding every eyebrow raise, every missing ring, every quiet moment. The same audience that used to root for their chaotic love story was now asking if the chaos was coming back with a legal signature this time. The silence they'd been protecting was now the very thing turning against them. Elizabeth read the comments. Every one of them. She didn't want to. She tried not to, but curiosity disguised itself as control. If she could see what people were saying, maybe she could manage it. Maybe she could deny it in just the right way. Or maybe deep down she was looking for someone to say what she couldn't. That they saw the hurt behind her eyes and still believed in them. But Andrei, he was sinking back into shutdown mode. The mention of people knowing made him flinch. When she showed him the Reddit thread, his shoulders tensed. When the influencer gossip pages started sniffing around, he flat out said he didn't want to talk about it to anyone. Because he knew what was coming. The edits, the exposure, the way online narratives twist everything. In public, Andrei had always been painted as a hard-to-like husband. The rude one, the arrogant one, the guy who came off too Intense, even when he was trying. Now imagine what happens when fans learn he said the word divorce. Even if it wasn't final, even if it came from a place of exhaustion, not rejection. The internet doesn't care why. They'll turn it into a slogan, a meme, a headline, another piece of proof for every critic who ever doubted him. He didn't want to be revillainized. He didn't want to be dragged again. He didn't want to be the man who emotionally destroyed Elizabeth Potthast. So, he did what he'd been doing for months. He avoided it. But for Elizabeth, avoidance was no longer an option. Because late at night, she was still unraveling behind the laundry room door where no one could hear her. That's where she broke. On the floor, sitting against the dryer, still clutching one of the kids' t-shirts like a life raft. She cried so hard her ribs burned. All the pressure she'd held in, appeasing the audience, protecting him, protecting her family, and maintaining the illusion that their life wasn't cracking, poured out. She cried because she missed her husband and he was still living in the same house. She cried because she didn't know what to say anymore. Because staying quiet felt like betrayal. But saying something felt like risking the only fragile thread holding them together. She wasn't afraid of divorce. She was afraid of dragging their pain through the public again. She knew how Twitter talked, how Instagram speculated, how TikToks would be made within hours of any post. She knew you couldn't confess hurt without being called weak. And if Andrei ever opened up publicly about his breakdown, someone somewhere would say he was manipulating or playing the victim. That he shouldn't have married an American woman if he couldn't handle the heat. She didn't want to hand that over to the world. Not yet. Because going public means giving strangers the right to dissect your pain, and they weren't ready. So instead, she tried to hold what little normal they had. She buried herself in routines. Woke up early, made pancakes with the kids, laughed so tight her throat hurt. She complimented him more, kissed him on the cheek when cameras were near. But in her head was a constant loop. Was I too blind? Was I too passive? Did I pour everything into protecting him and forget to check he was intact inside? Andrei noticed. He wasn't oblivious. At night, when the kids were asleep and she kept cleaning long after the house was spotless, he sometimes stood in the hallway watching. He'd open his mouth, then close it, walk away, come back, trying to say something he hadn't yet figured out. Because despite all the raw conversations they dabbled in weeks before, nothing was resolved. There were no guarantees, no clarity, only anxiety. And moments of fragile peace. But it's in those gray zones, when lovelessness hasn't arrived yet, but certainty is long gone, that questions become torture. That evening, the kids were watching a cartoon on low volume. The living room was dim. Elizabeth sat tidying up pillows that didn't need arranging. Her nerves had reached that stage where movement felt safer than conversation. Andrei walked over, hovered nearby. She could feel his presence before she turned. And that's when it came out, shaky, soft, scared. Do you still want to leave me? The sun was barely up. That soft gray haze that sneaks in before light invades the house was still hanging around the countertops. The kids were asleep upstairs. No phones buzzing. No cameras rolling, no makeup, no filters, just cereal bowls, spilled milk, and two people pretending not to be quietly bracing for another day of emotional tension. Elizabeth stood at the sink rinsing out a spoon, her hands moving on autopilot. Andrei was at the kitchen island, scrolling through something on his phone. Maybe the news, maybe nothing. The silence between them wasn't icy anymore. It was manageable. The kind of silence that says, we're trying but Haven't reached steady ground yet. Minutes passed. The quiet grew heavier. Then, as casually as someone asking if they were out of coffee, she said it. Do you still want to leave? The words hung there. No punctuation, no emotion. Just flat. And that's what made it hurt more. Not desperation, not pleading. Just a woman who had run out of energy to guess. Andrei didn't say anything at first. His eyes stayed down for a second. Then he put the phone face down. Slowly, almost cautiously, he walked around the island until he stood directly in front of her. She turned, but didn't look him in the eyes. Not yet. She was still bracing, still protecting. He reached out gently and placed his hands on her shoulders and steady, not possessive, no agenda, just contact. The kind that shakes a person back into their body after days of numbness. No, he said firmly but softly. I don't want to leave. I want us. He said the one word that broke her, and now he's saying the one thing that might hold them together. Her shoulders dropped like someone finally put down a weight she didn't realize was strapped to her spine. She didn't cry, not right away. She just stood there breathing for the first time in what felt like months. He apologized again, not with words, but in how he looked at her. Not guilty, not pitiful, just raw and present. He didn't promise the breakdown wouldn't return. He didn't say it was all going to be fine because he didn't know. But what he did know that he wanted them was enough to hang on to for now. This wasn't reconciliation with fireworks. There was no triumphant music or big social media post, no clearing of the air or epic monologue. There was still awkwardness, still tension, still unspoken things coiled around the corners of their daily routines. But what changed wasn't the problems. It was the posture. He was no longer hiding behind silence. And she was no longer holding her breath to protect the performance. Emotional safety doesn't arrive with clarity. It arrives when both people stop hiding. It opened a small door just wide enough for conversations to start again. Real ones, not the performative, how was your day? Clean-up talk. He started telling her when he was feeling off again. Without needing to label it, she started asking what he needed. Not how to fix him, but how to be there for him. The fakeness peeled away. Little by little, they stopped posting as much. Not out of bitterness, but because they didn't feel like curating things that weren't real. The silence between them softened. It wasn't weighted anymore. It just existed. Like space you learn how to exist in together without suffocating. But their private repair was now towing the edge of a public reckoning. The timing couldn't have been worse. Online whispers had turned into questions. Questions into Reddit theories, theories into DMs. And then came the unofficial confirmation. The moment someone noticed Elizabeth had quietly disabled comments on 2 couple posts. That was all it took. Suddenly, the term divorce was all over their name. TikTok creators with second on theories. Side-by-side comparison posts showing the before and after closeness in photos. A growing wave of noise spinning a narrative they hadn't even had a chance to confront in full. And the family still clueless. At least that's what Elizabeth hoped. But she knew the clock was ticking. Soon someone would ask. Her dad would do that. Long concerned sigh before dropping something pointed like you two okay her. Sisters way Messier it would come out at the worst time, probably mid-filming. Probably with way too many eyes in the room. Elizabeth wasn't sure how she'd play it, tell them the truth that their marriage was finally becoming real after months of being dangerously fake or lie. Again, just to postpone another round of family judgment. Andrei, to his credit, didn't want to handle that part yet. He asked her to wait. He said he wasn't strong enough to sit in front of Chuck or the cameras or anyone else and act fine. But he also wasn't ready to explain why he almost walked out. She nodded, not because she agreed, but because she understood. In a weird way, they were closer now than they'd been in years. But the connection was fragile, not weak, not fake, just new, exposed, sensitive. You can't rip the bandage off a wound that's still learning how to hold a stitch. So now the question wasn't whether they loved each other. It was whether the outside world, the audience, the family, the past could let this new version of their relationship grow without ripping it apart. Because the thing about public couples healing in private is that sooner or later the cameras want their cut of the story. And this time, Elizabeth wasn't sure what she'd say when they asked. As the credits quietly roll on their private crisis, Elizabeth and Andrei still have one eye open. Not for each other, for what's coming next. Because while the cameras may have missed those gut-punch conversations, while no one recorded the late-night breakdowns or whispered truths over a bowl of soggy Cheerios, there's something else now looming, bigger than any fight, heavier than any confession. Exposure, their fractured rhythm, the missed eye contact, the long stretches of nothing. They're no longer just scenes in a quiet household. They're about to become footage edited, cut, packaged, reverse-engineered into storylines. And no matter how much they tried to keep things under wraps, you can't shut out what's already in motion. Season is done filming, and post-production isn't interested in silence. It's interested in story. What the edit ends up showing might be safe. It might be kind. It might even be good. But they both know how this works. A single moment taken out of context, a look, an offhanded comment, a disconnect caught during a family gathering can turn into weeks of online firestorms. And this time, that fire is already warm. The audience is watching for cracks, for clues, for confirmation. They've been primed without even knowing it. A single word like divorce holds more weight when you say it in real life, but when you say it on reality TV, it becomes a headline. A plot twist, a ratings driver. That's the harsh truth. And as the premiere gets closer, the quiet progress they've made begins to feel less like peace and more like a countdown. How do you protect something still learning how to survive when the world's ready to devour it? Elizabeth's face already feels exposed in every promo clip. That tight smile, that weird energy fans are picking up on during teasers and interviews, it's all part of the rollout now. Comments are speculating who's mad at who checked out, who faked chemistry. Nobody online knows the real moment happened over cereal at AM. They didn't see Elizabeth clench the dish towel as he said, "I don't want to leave." They just want answers that fit in a swipeable post. But this is bigger than gossip. This entire arc, off-screen and on, is a reminder of what happens when a marriage gets too quiet to protect itself. When appearances replace conversations, when surviving the outside world makes you forget to check your own inner life. This isn't the story of a marriage that ended. It's worse. It's the story of a marriage that almost stopped existing while still technically intact. They almost emotionally burned out before even verbalizing what was wrong. And if Andrei hadn't whispered that sentence at the worst possible moment, maybe nothing would have ever snapped loud enough to be addressed. Maybe they'd still be filming through smiles, handing the audience a polished image even as the cracks kept crawling deeper into the foundation. But now it's out. And now they're not just partners trying to stay together. They're people trying to stay real in a world that profits off performance. Because staying together isn't the cliché goal here. It never was. Not for Elizabeth, not for him. The goal is something harder. Reconnection. Reclaiming and maybe eventually repair. And they're doing That in the middle of a franchise that leaves almost no room for healthy process. Where there's always a next tell-all, a next Twitter thread, a next viral moment about who looked away first. Every glance from here on out can be clipped and twisted. Every silence can be painted as resentment. Every laugh can be picked apart for proof. It's a modern love story, sure, but one where survival depends not on being perfect, but on staying human while cameras keep rolling. So, can they do it? Can Elizabeth and Andrei keep this fragile, messy, suddenly honest version of their relationship alive inside the shark tank of TLC, public opinion, and unfinished family business? Or will the next season push them back into roles they finally started to outgrow? Because season is about to air, and whatever the audience sees or doesn't see, one thing is clear. This time the real drama happened when no one was watching. Coming up next on TLC Drama Files, we break down the subtle online clues that signaled something was seriously off. The interviews that contradicted the timeline and the moments fans missed that now make way too much sense in hindsight. You thought this season was over? Oh no, it's just getting started.